Hello and welcome back once again to movie reviews. So today went and saw another movie, and again it's one that's been out for a little bit, but it's been on my list of things I wanted to see, and finally got around to seeing it, and that would be The Gift. So yeah, it is a little bit of a break from my normal comic book or action adventure-y type of things, or comedies or whatever I normally watch, and went a little bit more with the sci-fi, I went a little bit more with the suspense thriller type of movie, which I used to be a big fan of, like, horror movies until a lot of them started becoming suspense thrillers, and then after a while suspense thrillers kind of ran their course with me, and I kind of just gave up on the whole genre in general. But this one actually looked kind of interesting just because I wanted to see where they were going to go with it. And honestly, it kept me intrigued enough to stay till the end of the movie. Not that I would have walked out on it anyway, but it keeps you kind of guessing. And it kept me intrigued enough to, like, every time I was starting to wane away from it, like, okay, this is kind of boring, it would come back with something. Just to be like, oh wow, I wonder where that's going to go type of thing. So, of course, at one point I thought I had it figured out what was going to happen. And then as it progressed a little bit more, I was like, okay, I don't think that's the direction they're going to go in, but it's still an open possibility. Or it could be, like, two other things. So there's, like, three possible endings that they could have led towards. And it's, again, just because I've seen so many of these movies, it's kind of obvious that even when you know there's going to be a twist in the movie, it's kind of easy to figure out what the twist is going to be, and the only way they could really throw an additional twist on it is if they didn't do a twist at all, and just went with the standard cookie cutter, this is how it's going to end type of thing, which, surprisingly, they didn't do that. They didn't do the twist I thought it was going to be, they didn't do the standard ending. They actually went sort of in another direction, which I kind of leaned towards, but at the same time, they didn't go fully that route. They sort of kicked it back to the original idea. It's actually a nice balance of the twist. It's like, okay, here's the movie, here's what you know would probably happen, here's what you could think might be happening if there's a twist ending, here's this other slimmer possibility for a twist ending, which we're going to end up going with, but then we're back to what traditionally would have happened in the movie. You know, it's a really good balance of what a suspense thriller could be. And again, I actually enjoy calling this one a suspense thriller as opposed to how so many horror movies kind of turned into suspense thrillers, but they still try to have the horror aspect. This one doesn't really have a horror aspect to it. The previews make it look like it would. Like he's going to become this type of, like, serial killer type of guy. But really, they actually shy away from that quite a bit. Like, everything in the preview that you see that could lead to him being kind of serial killer-ish is actually explainable through other means. And and as far as horror aspects, there's, like, an occasional jump scare, like the girl's walking through the house and she'll turn on the light and, like, the dog's there and barks at her or something. You know, but it doesn't do the stinger lead up where it's like da 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 da, you know, type of thing, so you know that it's coming. It's just like, oh, she's walking through the house, she thinks, you know, at most you probably figure, oh, the guy will be there or something, and it's like, bark, and it's like, oh, it's the dog, okay. So it kind of earns its handful of jump scares. I think there's 3 total through the entire movie, which isn't bad. So, let's get into the recap of the movie. The guy and his wife move back to the guy's hometown to reestablish, I guess he's got a partnership in an agency back home. She's kind of stepped away from her big money job to kind of work out of the home, and they were originally going to start a family. But then some stuff got in the way, so now they're like, okay, let's step back from everything, get back to our roots a little bit, and work on the family finally. So they're doing that, And as they're out shopping at like an IKEA or something, this guy's kind of following him around looking at him. And he finally approaches him. He goes, sorry, I don't mean to bother you, but I think I know you. And he's like, did you go to this school? And like, were you in these classes? And he's like, yeah. He's like trying to figure out who the guy is. And finally he's like, he tells him his name. He's like, oh wow, I didn't even recognize you. So at first they kind of have this like old, hey, we knew each other from school, kind of hit off like, oh, so since you're just coming back into town, maybe we'll get together, have dinner or something, And they kind of do it, at first it's kind of a nice gesture, kind of in passing, but, it could potentially happen. And then the guy kind of leaves them a gift at their door, and they're like, well, how did he get our address? Well, as you're talking to him, the store clerk asks for an address for the furniture to be delivered at, and you give it to him. Well, he's standing right there. You don't think he'd remember. And it was a simple address, like 34 Lakeview. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's real hard to remember, So they're like, well, how do you get her address? And they're like, I don't know. And then that's like the only time they ever really address it. So then he stops by another time just to like kind of, just wanted to make sure you got the present. Is he home? I thought maybe we'd catch up. And they're like, the wife's like, no, he's at work right now, but, I was just making dinner. He should be home fairly soon. You want to stay for dinner? So they have their dinner, and, he seems like he's kind of had a bit too much, and he's just kind of rambling, which the guy always kind of seems off-put to him a little bit for a reason, but the wife's kind of open to him. And so he leaves, and, he's like, is it just me, or does he seem really weird? And she's like, well, he seems a little socially awkward, but she's like, I can be just as socially awkward as he was, if I'm in a situation where I don't really know people that well. And then the guy's like, oh, yeah, but, I kind of remember back in school we had this nickname for him. We called him Weirdo. And it's like, okay, that's a nickname for someone, really? So he kind of keeps dropping by the house, trying to help her out with stuff because he knows that she's getting settled in. Each time he comes over, he's like, what was the guy's name, Steve or something? He's like, is Steve around? She's like, no, he's at work. And he's like, oh, yeah, would be, it's roughly the same time of day I stopped by the last time. And so, but he kind of helps her out with something. She gets used to kind of having him around, being friendly towards him. She seems like a relatively decent person. So then, he's like, well, since you guys invited me over for dinner, I'd like to return the favor. I'd like to have you guys over for dinner. So they're like, okay. And the husband's kind of like telling all his new friends, like, oh, I don't really want to be friends with the guy, so now he's kind of forcing me into having to have this talk with him and break up with him. And so, of course, they go to have the dinner, and, the husband's kind of like being the dick and like, we don't want to be friends with you type of thing. It's like, get your life sorted out, leave us alone. And it's like really uncalled for, he could have handled it a lot better, but. So then the wife starts noticing things around the house, like the fish are dead. Her dog goes missing. And they're like, oh, it's got to be him, it's got to be him, it's got to be him. You pissed him off when you told him. And it's like, really? You just assume that you told the guy to fuck off and he's automatically going to start stalking you and stuff? Yeah, he's socially awkward. It doesn't mean anything, So then, as things are kind of happening around the house, you never actually see this guy anymore. They don't have him like standing in the window creepily or anything like that, standing in the shadows. You never actually see him, so you don't know if it's actually him or if it's the wife's imagination, because she's always kind of home by herself. And that's when they sort of delve into her past of why she stepped down from her company. And it has to do with, like, I don't want to say she had a drug addiction, but she had started taking some type of pills. And I guess at another point she had started mixing them with alcohol and ended up losing her baby because of it. And that's why she stepped down from the company, because they're like, well, she was only doing the pills and drinking because of the stress from the job. So she took a lesser role and was working out of home after they moved. So then it's kind of leading to, well, maybe it's just the wife imagining all this. And then as the husband's like, you're imagining it, it's nothing. And then you kind of start to think, or is the wife doing it to herself? Like, maybe the wife is actually a psycho, and just because of this situation, she's fucking with the husband. It's like she's doing drugs and forgetting what she's doing and doesn't realize she's doing stuff to herself just to get back at her husband for something. So that seems like they might be going that way with it. And then, of course, they do the flop over to another twist that was kind of obvious from the trailer, and that's that there's actually a backstory between the husband and this guy, and that the reason the husband doesn't want to be friends with him is because of something that happened in the past, which turns out the husband was a bully. Ooh, like, you couldn't tell that. And he had tormented this kid in school, and the guy's kind of like, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. We're adults now, let's forget all that. And the husband's still kind of a dick and a bully, and, he's like, I'm not going to apologize to you, fuck off type of thing. So then it's going that route to where the wife is finally figuring out, like, oh, you did all this to him, and you're still messing with him now, it's like you're rude to him. He's, you did all this stuff to him as a kid, he was willing to forgive you, and you're still, you were a bully then, you're a bully now type of thing. So then the wife kind of starts to become estranged from the husband. And then he finally says, well, what do I got to do to get you past all this? And she's like, you have to make amends with him. It's like, he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And she's like, well, then, that's what you got to do to get back in my good graces type of thing. So he finally goes to talk to him, and he's like, the wife's kind of mad at me, so I wanted to apologize to you. And he's like, so you're only apologizing to me because she told you to? He's like, no, he's like, I was really trying here. He's like, were you really? Because, I tried, and you kind of, told me to F off. So, of course, they get into a fight. Then he goes home and tells the wife that, oh, everything went fine, he's understanding, but we're still going to keep our distance, whatever. And so they kind of move on with their lives. She manages to get pregnant, have a baby, and she starts to realize that the husband is still, she believes that they made amends, but she realizes that he's still being a dick in other aspects of his life, and she's just like, it's not the guy that I married, or maybe it was, maybe I was just too blind to see it. So she starts to distance herself from him, wants to separate from him and whatnot. But there's the baby aspect. So then she has the baby, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go home and take a shower, and I'll be back. And, we'll talk about, what's going on between us. So he gets home. Okay, now this is the big spoiler, so if you don't want to know the ending of this movie, you want to see it for yourself, tune out for a couple minutes. So he gets home, and there's this package from the guy, and it's another gift. And, he opens it up, and it's like a little carrier basket for the baby, and he's like, okay, well, whatever. And then he realizes there's like a DVD inside. So he pops in the DVD to see what it is, and I don't want to spoil too much of it. Let's just say it leads to the possibility that he's not the father of the baby. So then, he goes back to the hospital. He's trying to track down the guy who he finds out is at the hospital. So they end up having a conversation over the phone. He's like, I could tell you that, nothing happened and the baby's not mine and you're the father and all that, but, you're such a liar, I don't think you'd be able to believe me. He goes, but, yeah, I didn't do anything. Or maybe I did, what does it matter? So then he's like, you'll just have to judge it for yourself and always have that weighing over your head, just like the way you treated me all those years ago and left something hanging over my head, I'm leaving this hanging over your head. And he goes back in to try and talk to his wife, and she just kind of tells the nurse she doesn't want anything to do with him, so they kind of shuttle him off out of the room. And credits. Nothing's ever really resolved, nothing's ever really revealed. Which is actually something I kind of liked about it. I like rough endings like that where it just leaves you thinking like, wait, what? There's no more to it? No, that's it. Like I said, it's kind of a psychological thriller. That's what I was meant to say earlier instead of sci-fi. It's a psychological thriller. Makes you think a little bit. And like I said, it goes in directions where you think you know what's going on, and as soon as you do, it's like, no, we're going to go back over this way. So, okay, so that's more or less the movie. So as far as a star rating on this one, I'm going to give this one a 3.5. Like I said, there's not really a whole lot going on in the movie. I mean, I spent 15 minutes here explaining it, and it probably doesn't seem all that appealing to you guys, because honestly, just thinking back to what I just said, it doesn't really sound all that interesting. So it's kind of a middle-of-the-road movie as far as a psychological thriller goes, but I'm giving it that extra half because it left such a broad ending. It doesn't really resolve anything. Everything's kind of up in the air. It has a couple different twists and turns that kind of throw you for a loop. It doesn't go overboard with the suspense, jump scare crap. So it gets some higher points for subtle things like that. You know, it's kind of a lost art in filmmaking that sometimes you can leave a rough ending, and it actually sort of makes the movie better. You don't need everything wrapped up into a nice little ball. So yeah, I'm going to go 3.5 on that one. If it had actually held my suspense better, I probably would have went ahead and gave it a 4 and, you know, gave it a higher rating, but 3.5 I think is a good place for this one. So that's The Gift. I might be going and seeing another movie tomorrow. I'm not sure yet. It depends on my schedule and finances. I kind of overspent this month, and I kind of kicking myself for that, but I might be able to squeeze in at least one more movie for this pay period. So if I do, there'll be another one of those. Like I said, I do got some more gameplay footage coming up. Finally finishing off Safecracker. So looking forward to that. And then a couple other things. So that's it for this episode. Again, as always, thank you for watching. And until next time, we'll see you at the movies.